Hello, 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 hello. George F. Grundy II, your favorite veteran. I'm here, still in Port Huron at the Tuskegee Airmen Memorial, and I'm about to show y'all what it looks like. If you want to see it, you can pause the video so you can read it, but I'm just going to go around the memorial. Here we go. Action.
Water stuff. This is beautiful. Took all this time.
70 years.
Yeah.
70 years. But you know what's amazing about it? Somebody was still alive to tell the story about the men.
Yeah.
He actually flew with
Went
them.
to school and everything. And these people, man, they would start flying overseas in the war, and they movies on it.
Right.
They did a documentary movie. Why pilots wanted them to be there.
Right.
Because before,
Because they never lost the bomber.
but they used to shoot them all down. Germans, they would fly over to Germany, they pick them off. They took these, they escort them over, they would shoot down on them, and give them
But they
free.
never lost their escort.
No, never lost one.
They may have lost, but they never lost the escort.
Great.
So that means that they did their job with 100% accuracy.
They started in 1940.
So if you want to see what it say, then you just pause the video, read it and look at it. But this is history. This is American history. More specific, Black American history. And it's beautiful. I am standing on the shoulders of my ancestors and the great people that they are. And look at here, I got something else for y'all. Would you look at there? That says Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Jefferson.
And some of those combat pilots were with the 99. And the 99 was my heart, but they went over with the some of those 355 came back before they But over the ones that have been living over the last 5 years, 10 years, 9 times out of 10, they had flown either the RedTail 47 or Pistol 1. So that's when they started to become known as the RedTail pilots. So out of those RedTail pilots, there's only 8 that are still living. But out of that 15,000 plus, 200 to 300
okay,
that are still living.
My daughter's godfather just died probably about 5 years ago.
Okay.
He was not the original, one of the originals. His name was Cooper. We only called him Mr. Cooper, so I don't know what his first name was. I'll probably could find it. But anyway, he was invited to the White House to get his award, and his wife was too
Congressional
sick.
Gold Medal?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And his wife was too sick to go, so he wouldn't leave her.
Wow.
And once they still invited him anytime he went, but he was too sick. He ended up dying in the meantime.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing is those guys were very honorable men, and when it came to their wives, especially wives of 40, 50 years, they were so dedicated to them.
Yep.
James Harvey, one of the first Top Guns with Harry Stewart that's still living, James Harvey's wife was ill for the longest, and you know, everywhere he went, he would take her, and she passed a few years back, and you know, it's sad for us, but you know, looking at the way he cared for her as men, as a man, looking at the way he cared for her, really stuck with me, and was really a lesson to be taught. Same thing with Harry. Harry's wife just passed a few years ago. Same thing, she was ill for some time. And Harry would never really go out to places. He just started going out to places maybe over the last 3 years or so. Did I give you a card?
No, you didn't. I was going to ask you for one.
Yeah, he just started.
Maybe you can come and speak with our youth group in the ACP. And we do work along with some, like she's in both our organizations, so we can have both groups.
Okay.
Maybe
if it's an event on the weekend, take a look at my website, DetroitRedTail.org. I've got an event calendar, and check that link. and look at the days. I really only go out on Saturdays and Sundays because I'm still working during the week. And, you know, a lot of the guys in our chapter are retired. They get a chance to go out during the week and talk to people and have good meals.
Okay, y'all.
But I have to wait till the week.
We have officially, Flint has officially represented in Port Huron at the RedTail Tuskegee Airmen Memorial. So y'all can go back and look at the other video and share the experience as much as possible.
Thank you for your time and attention. We appreciate it.
Well, hold on, I'm gonna do one more thing. Are you going?
Thank you. See you at the Blues Festival.
Mr. Palmer, you going to the luncheon?
No, I'm going to Cracker Barrel. I didn't get a ticket for it.
I'm live right now. I want you to give us a little synopsis on what the reason for the vehicle being.
Okay. Alrighty. So
just introduce yourself. Yeah.
My name is Eric Palmer. Is that on Facebook?
Yes.
Make sure you tag Detroit RedTail.
I will.
RedTail is one word. So my name is Eric Palmer. I'm the president of Detroit RedTail Inc. What we have before us is a 2011 Ford Mustang, RedTail Ford Mustang that is wrapped to emulate the RedTail P51 Mustang of the 332nd Fighter Group. On the vehicle, on the passenger side, I honor Alexander Jefferson, who was out here today. Alex is 99. He'll be 100 on the 15th of November. On his 18th mission, he was shot down, served the balance of the war as a POW. Born and raised in Detroit, lives out in Southfield now. Under the hood, we talk about the 477 Bombardment Group, which a lot of people don't realize existed. The 477th was a B-25 outfit that was being trained up to go to the Pacific and serve. But their leadership, a guy by the name of Bob Selway, was a strict segregationist who wanted this whole Tuskegee Airmen experience to fail. Not only was he a segregationist, but these guys were stationed at Selfridge. They were over here at Selfridge during that time for bomber training. And the base commander at Selfridge was a segregationist also. Both of them...
Not in the north.
Yes,
not in Michigan.
North. Yes.
Michigan?
Both of them basically told the soldiers that while there's colored officers on base, there'll be no integration between white and colored soldiers.
So it just wasn't a southern thing?
No, it wasn't a southern thing. It wasn't just a southern thing. So those guys, the 477, their whole struggle was around paying to get into the officers club and not being allowed into the officers club. And they eventually kicked them out of Selfridge. They ended up in Freeman Field, Indiana, where an incident happened. They were put under arrest in quarters and court-martialed, but the NAACP got them off. Now, Alex was part of the 332nd Fighter Group who transitioned through Selfridge to learn how to fly the P-39s that we were talking about today. And Alex was part of that discussion when the base commander called all the black soldiers to the base theater and told them there'd be no integration between white and colored officers. On one hand, the 332nd really didn't move them that much because they were just transitioning through Selfridge and they were going to Walterboro before they went overseas.
Okay.
The 477th, though, was stationed. So we talked about the different planes that they flew from primary training, basic training, advanced. The 99th Fighter Squadron was the first one that was stood up. And they went over earlier than the 332nd Fighter Group. They went over with P-40s. The 332nd Fighter Group, which existed of the 100th, 301st, and 302nd, when they went over with the P-39, the Air Cobra. There are pilots of the 99th that never flew the P-39s. There's pilots with the 332nd that never flew the P-40. Eventually, they moved into the P-47s. They had those for about close to a month. And a lot of people don't realize the P-47 was the first plane that had the red tail painted on it. And the red tail was not a decision that the 332nd made. It was the 15th Air Force that defined that the 332nd's tails would be painted red. Nobody knows why. They don't know if it was because they wanted to see the shame of red flying away from the action. When the situation actually turned on its head, they found that the red tails were the ones that were staying in the action, and the white bomber pilots of the 15th Air Force started requesting those guys with the red tails before they even knew they were black. So the P-47s, first ones with the red tails, then they ended the war with the P-51s. Across the cow, we just talked about the history of blacks in aviation, starting with Jacques Bullard in 1917, who was an infantry soldier for the U.S. during World War I over in France. He got hurt, and he got with the French. And the French trained him to fly, and a lot of U.S. soldiers that would get hurt, they would be sent home or taken out of combat. But a lot of them would go over and fight for the French. The French would allow them to fight, so that's what he did. He's the first noted black aviator. Unofficially, they say he knocked down 2 German planes.
So it was more like 10.
It could have been. It could have been. But, you know, it just goes through all the history through the 70s. There's more history going into the 80s and 90s, but I only had enough space to go into the 70s. Bob Ashby was the only person that was of that Tuskegee Airmen experience that became a commercial airline pilot, and that wasn't until 1973.
Wow.
So 1949 gunnery meet, Harry Stewart, this is his side of the car, knocked down those 3 German planes, April 1st of 45, but in 1949 he was part of the 332nd group of 3 primary pilots and an alternate who went to Nellis Air Force Base for the first air gunnery competition that the Air Force started there in 1949. There were 2 classes of planes. There was the conventional class, which were your prop planes. There were 7 fighter groups of the conventional class, and then there were 5 jet class groups. 10 days of events. There was 2 events that the jet class could not do, I think that involved around bombing. But after all the dust was settled and all the scores were tabulated, the highest score out of everybody was a still segregated 332nd Fighter Group. Harry Stewart, James Harvey are 2 guys that are still alive from the pilots. They were somewhere a number of years ago, somebody hollered out, hey, you guys are the first Top Guns. So that's what they billed themselves as.
So pretty much the folks they tried to put on the short bus ended up being the ones that was the smartest out of everything, or the most aggressive, smartest, and the best out of the best.
Yes. Yeah.
So the short bus didn't work.
The short bus trick didn't work. Lune Coquette was the name of Harry's plane after a song in 1925, written by Guy Lombardo, remade by the Platters. In the song, the lyricist is singing to a young lady about her being his little coquette. I asked Harry if he sung that to the young ladies. He would neither confirm nor deny. He just smiled. Now let me show you something I got in the trunk. I have storyboards that I set up when I go places, and this particular one is one that, you know, kind of outlines the thoughts and ideas of society and military leadership at that time. 1925, the height of Jim Crow. The War College decided to do this study called The Use of Negro Manpower in War. 63 pages of meat where they researched the performance of Negroes at the time from the Revolutionary War all the way through World War I. And they recognized all of our successes. All of the successes.
Wow.
But this Major General Eli, I call this the Mueller Report because it's the same thing what Bill Barr did with the Mueller Report. He dumbed it down and flipped it, and those without critical thinking skills believe it. So in this report, actually concentrate over here. Basically, he is mentally inferior to the white man. He is by nature subservient, believes himself to be inferior to the white man. He is most susceptible to influence of crowd psychology. He cannot control himself in the fear of danger to the extent the white man can. Just on and a bunch of garbage that this was fed to the public And I tell people, you got to realize, 1925, the height of Jim Crow, everybody in society was doing what they could to promote this idea about what black folks were.
Yeah,
and after World War II, after the 332nd did what they did with airplanes, after the 761st, the 761st Tank Battalion, the original Black Panthers, after what they did, they escorted Patton all through Europe. The 92nd Infantry, the Triple Nickels. I've got a fifth cousin that was a Triple Nickel. That was the first set of African American infantry paratroopers. After what all these guys accomplished, when it came to idiot statements like this, feeling inferior, you know, people realized at that point in time, well, the critical thinkers realized at that point in time that this was no better than a roll of toilet paper.
Less than that.
Yeah. So, you know, on the
toilet paper feels better.
Yeah, that's true. You want toilet paper for your butt. You don't want this crap for your butt.
Nonsense.
But yeah, for the most part, the passenger side represent Alexander Jefferson's plane, and his plane was called Margot after his girlfriend down in Tuskegee, who he lost contact with. You know, car shows, cruises, parades, anywhere that they cannot get an airplane, I can get the car.
Well, I'm gonna begin with you because I plan on becoming one of your brothers.
That'll work.
You know,
That'll work.
So that is my plan, and then we'll work on doing some other things and making sure the history doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Our story doesn't stop.
Right.
Because the his story ain't right.
No. and that's the thing, you know, with me getting involved when I did in the early 2000s. I had just learned about the Tuskegee Airmen in the mid-90s when the HBO movie,
Mr. Lawrence, keep texting me. We gotta get to the luncheon.
Yeah, I understand.
But we're gonna finish this. We're gonna have another one. And we're gonna go into detail.
All right now.
Yes, sir.
Y'all be cool now.
You
Enjoy
too,
that
fam.
luncheon.
Yes, sir. This is George F. Grundy II. Y'all heard what you heard. It is what it is. If you don't believe it, look it up. I'm out.